everyone, and welcome back to What's the Plan, the podcast where we dive into the matters of our careers in the architecture and urban planning field. I'm Haley.
And I'm Andrea. So, Haley, what's the plan this week?
This week's plan is all about liminal space.
Yeah, so this is another In the Hotspot, where one of us will be put in the hotspot by answering questions on a specific topic that we want to explore.
These topics include concepts that one of us are unfamiliar with, giving us a chance to learn alongside the listeners as the host in the hotspot teaches us all about it.
This time around, it is my turn to be in the hotspot.
Woohoo! So when we were coming up for a concept this week, you had mentioned the topic of liminal space.
Yeah.
So I've personally never heard of it before, but you did also mention that it's been around TikTok recently. So let's get into that.
Okay.
First of all, what is liminal space?
Yeah, so depending on the lens that you're kind of approaching this topic or this concept, the definition kind of varies.
Okay.
So let's just start off with the etymological standpoint. So the word liminal comes from the Latin word limen, which hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, limen, which means threshold.
Oh, okay.
So therefore liminal space are usually transitional or transformative spaces.
Okay.
And another reason why, it's just why a lot of people use the word liminal to kind of describe a feeling or a place they're in, especially when it comes to they're kind of on the precipice or the verge of a major either life milestone or career milestone.
Okay.
And similar to the origin of the word, in an architectural response or perspective, liminal space are spaces of transition, often with no single purpose.
Okay.
So, Haley, can you think of any examples based on this definition?
Examples of a liminal space.
Yeah, examples of a liminal space.
I'm going to be honest, I'm still a little confused, so not quite yet.
Okay, so as I said, spaces are transition. So it's how do you get from one room to another? What connects these spaces?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so a hallway, for
Yeah,
example?
so a hallway is a transitional space because it's not really a space that one, occupies for a purpose.
Right,
It has no,
okay.
There is no real purpose to it. Just stay in the space. It's more so to use to get from one place to another.
Right.
So that is a transitional space.
Got it, okay.
So, hallways and, threshold, meaning doorways, and, anything such as, even waiting rooms. Those are more so transitional spaces because you're waiting to be seen by someone else in another room. So, although the definition of liminal space that has taken the internet by storm is, they do share some qualities with the architectural definition.
Right.
The concept's sort of been, co-opted and, into a much larger movement.
Okay. So when you say co-opted into a much larger movement, would that movement be what TikTok is referring to?
Yeah. So it's not only TikTok that has been obsessed with the idea of liminal space.
Okay.
But basically Reddit, Tumblr, Instagram, essentially any image-based social media platform, there has been a cult following of liminal spaces, and for one primary reason.
Okay.
And this actually can be traced even further back to 2019.
2019, wow.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, to a post that was made on 4chan, which is a very, I think,
Whoa.
niche internet, website that people go to, of an image of a creepy hallway. So the poster, posted this image of a creepy hallway asking people, oh, how do you feel about this space? Or, have you been to spaces that kind of make you feel the same way? And then they just kind of started a whole discussion of people talking about, these liminal spaces. But before I go into further about talking about that one reason that has, the world enamored, it should be said that many of these spaces that the internet are preoccupied with aren't exactly because of its, liminality.
Okay.
But more so it's, due to its decontextualized nature, which I'll dive into a bit after.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
There's a lot of big words and big concepts, so we'll take it one step at a time.
Okay.
So, the primary reason that that has everyone commenting about liminal spaces is because of nostalgia.
Okay.
Yeah, so nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past. Typically, for a period of time or a place in time when a lot of people were happy.
Oh, that is so sad. But okay, yeah, I feel it. I get it.
Yeah, so like, I don't know about you, but like being locked down for several months, multiple times throughout the pandemic, especially since Toronto is the most locked down city in North America. Mm-hmm. The pandemic has me like quite reminiscent of the past.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like, have you been feeling that? I don't know about you. Is it just me or?
Like, yes, definitely, but I think I'm generally a person that likes being at home.
Okay.
So I didn't mind it that much, but I do reminisce on, like, when we got to travel and, like, go out and explore different cities and countries. Maybe just not necessarily my own my own city and like just walking outside, going shopping like that. Not as much as just being able to travel.
Yeah.
But let's hear your side of it.
Yeah. So like for me, like I was living downtown when the pandemic started. So like for me, a lot of things that I've kind of missed are some simpler like mundane tasks that I used to not really think much of.
Okay.
So, like, simple enough is, like, I lived right by the Union Center. So, a lot of times, I would love to just cut through the Union Center, so, like, walk through the building just to get from one destination to another.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes because it's, like, it's cold outside, or I just want to be indoors and look at things. So, there's sort of, like, window shopping when I travel from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Unrelated to the mall. But because of, like, lockdowns, I can't do that. I can't just walk into a building to cross through to somewhere else. Because the doors are locked, so I have to walk around. It's just, like... simple things like that I miss a lot. Or, like, actually just, like, going to the airport. Because when you go to the airport, you don't really think much about it. Because you're always thinking about the destination that you want to get to.
Yeah.
So, like, I also miss the, like, the whole, like, build-up or the lead-up of going from, like, to the airports and, like, the excitement you have, and, like, checking in, going through the different stages and get to your gate and then getting to your point.
Okay.
It's just, like, things that, like, I don't know, things that you don't really normally think of. It's, like, because you don't have any of that at that moment, you're like, oh, I kind of miss that. Even though, like, a lot of people get, like, anxious or at the airport because there's so much they need to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, like, back to the internet.
Yeah.
Back to the internet. So, as a result of the pandemic and the reflecting that a lot of people have done, the idea of liminal space sort of become romanticized.
Okay.
And synonymous with the idea of, like, abandoned buildings of a particular typology.
Okay.
And these typologies often include such as, like, commerce, so, like, shopping malls, so retail stores, all that kind of stuff. Movement, so, like, transportation hubs, and transaction.
Okay.
So, like, in addition to empty shopping malls, airport gates, waiting rooms, these also include, like, offices, because everyone's working from home now, parking lots, especially in the suburbs when, like, normally the parking lot would be filled with people because you need a car to drive from one place to another. Yeah. But because everyone's home, no one's parking. Parking lots, and then other, like, and so forth. Like, anything that is kind of, like, a relic of the pre-internet era is now included into this.
Okay.
Which is normally not when you look at in the architectural lens. But because, like, the internet has kind of adopted a different view of it. It's like they're also looking at things that were really popular, I guess, in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Okay.
So, like, these include indoor playgrounds, such as, like, Chuck E. Cheese, like, the McDonald's play place, or the Playhouse. And, like, to even 90s and early 2000s, like, patterned carpets. Oh. Which is an interesting one that I was not, like... I was, like, confused about, because I'm like, this is not really a liminal space, this is a carpet. But I'm like, sure, okay.
Okay, so you say sure, okay, but in my head, I'm still thinking, like, what? So can you kind of maybe try to explain how that could be, like, tied into liminal spacing, the carpet?
Yeah, like, so because the idea of liminal space has been romanticized, the idea of, like, things that they used to have or longing for. A lot of things that these TikTokers or internet personnel have included are, like, spaces of their childhood. So, like, a lot of times when you go to, like, party rooms or party places or, like, even just the movie theater or any, I guess, like, social settings. Yeah. Back then, there were a lot of patterned carpets because that was the trend. That was the style. Yeah. But, like, because we have kind of adapted throughout the years, a lot of people have really liked minimalism. So, a lot of these carpets are no longer. So because of that, like when they see these carpets, they think of their childhood, and they think about how much fun they had in their childhood, and because they're now locked at home, they're like, oh, I miss this, I like this. So then they're like just posting about it on TikTok, saying like, oh, this is how life used to be, and life now is so much different.
So their definition of liminal space, does it more go in line with space as in time and space rather than like the actual physical space?
Yeah, so like for this reason, I think the thing that I mentioned before, decontextualized space, is a much better term to define what TikTok and the internet has been posting about. Yeah. Because like in a way they are liminal spaces, as in some occasions these are not like purposeful built space, but a lot of times the images of places that people are posting are more so like lost due to abandonment, so no one going there anymore, right? Or bad design, which is another thing, or like or just no longer required in our daily lives. And as well, like these images lack specific details to reference to like one particular location in the world, so therefore it can be applicable to anybody, which is why a lot of people are like reminiscing about the same things, even though they're on one side of the world and a different side of the world, like so in some cases the trend more so focuses on the feeling of canopsia, which is the dejected atmosphere of a place that is usually bustling with people but is now abandoned. So like train stations would be a perfect example of that. And like in conjunction with abandoned spaces, viewing images of them often evoke feelings of eeriness, because in your mind you know like this is not how it's supposed to look like, but because there's no people, like kind of removes the purpose, or like isolates the space of just for the space. And like so they're unsettling to look at because you're aware that like they once performed a specific purpose, but now they're just like a marker of one's past, right? So, like, I think a lot of it has to, like, messing with your brain of, like, time and space and, like, feelings. And, like, this notion is not isolated to tangible or physical spaces, actually. This has been a trend with the type of entertainment that we are now consuming. And the Atlantic's Sophie Gilbert, she noticed last year that there are a lot of, like, new TV shows that are creating a space where the past never dies. So a lot of TV shows that kind of, like, do throwback themes, or, like, a lot of reboots of old shows. So, like, singling out Netflix, she comments that these new shows formed out, like, pieces of relics, liberated from the burden of having to say much that's new at all. So it's like, by watching these old shows or, like, reviving these old shows, you don't have to think about what's happening in the current. You can always just look back in the past into a happier time where you know for sure, like, you'll feel good. So, like, that's sort of, like, what kind of attributes or contribute to people, like, being so obsessed with this idea. And like by like excavating artifacts from the past, we can like kind of just cushion ourselves from the harsh realities that we have to face now. So like in my mind, you can just sum this up to like escapism.
I mean, with everything that's going on in today's world, I can definitely see why like everyone seems to be obsessed with this concept. But given that we are a planning / architecture based podcast, can you elaborate more on liminal spaces in the architectural context?
Yeah, for sure. So to the extent of my knowledge and the research I conducted in preparation for this episode, there doesn't seem to be like a lot of publications dedicated to discussing liminal spaces. I find that most of the articles or the publications I did find are more so people's like master's thesis and stuff like that. And so for the ones I did find, like most of this discourse revolves around the idea of like activating or engaging such spaces to improve the human experience. So what that means is that finding ways to have a secondary purpose than being just a temporary or space that someone goes in passing. And like just like in tech where you have like UX, UI, like in architecture you have HX, which is like the human experience. So like not a lot of firms kind of talk about that. But like it is pretty important because like you're building buildings, designing spaces for people.
For sure.
So like examples of this would be like using a lobby to establish the brand identity of the users that occupy the space. So like if you're a company that sells toys, like you should make your lobby a space where people can maybe actually try out the toys and enjoy the toys while they're waiting to, like, be brought into a meeting room or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then another way is, like, using corridors or hallways to serve as inspiration.
Okay.
Or a space just to tell a story about your organization. So, like, a lot of people sometimes would put, like, timelines on the walls of, like, saying, like, our business started this year by this person, and then, like, this is how much we have grown. Or, like, another perfect, like, a really good example of this is actually Disney.
Okay.
Yeah, so Disney does an amazing job at this at their parks in making the queue to the rides entertaining. So it's like, I don't know, have you been to Disneyland before or
Never.
Disney World?
No.
Okay, so yeah, I've only been to, like, one Disneyland, but I have some friends that are really into Disney, and, like, they would talk about this a lot, how, like, when they're lining up for the ride, you don't really feel that the line is super long or, like, the line isn't burdensome, because as you're waiting, they create, like, kind of entertainment things for you to do or look at. So it's, like, kind of occupying you.
Yeah.
And, like, making it feel like that ride, that build up or the lineup.
It's part of the experience.
It's part of the experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, like, a line is just a line for some people. But in this sense, for Disney, it's, like, building onto your human experience.
Wow.
So, those are some examples of, or the most popular examples of how people talk about liminal space. And as for notable architects, on this topic, there's Rem Koolhaas of OMA. And I don't know if you heard of OMA, but they're famous for, like, the Seattle Library.
Okay.
And then recently they did a museum called the New Museum in New York City. And Rem Koolhaas, he actually published a performative essay on this topic called Junk Space.
Okay.
And I say performative because, like, the way it was written is quite rambly. There's a lot of run-on sentences. And done so in, like, a lamentation manner where it's, like, kind of, like he distastes or dislikes what he's talking about.
Okay.
And, like, because it's written in such a manner, the essay reflects his disdain for, like, decontextualized space.
Jeez, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, in a way, like, he dislikes these huge spaces full of absence. Junk space, like, it follows no rules, and it has no inherent order and no connections between its parts. So, like, basically, the moral of the story is it's, like, context matters. So when you're designing your building, always design with context in mind. Whether that is, like, the social context, the historical context, or just even just, like, the actual landscape itself.
Yeah, so to sum up everything that we've talked about so far, from not knowing what a liminal space is at all to where we're at now, it sounds that a liminal space is something that connects, is usually meant to connect to greater ideas or greater areas, but it is a way to make the most out of that connection. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, the first part is, like, accurate.
Yeah?
It is a space of, like, between two spaces where, like, it's like a connector of sorts, whether that's space or time. But yeah, a lot of people do not actually try to engage that space, so that is something that a lot of architects are trying to work on now.
Okay, so this is a concept that should or is becoming more ingrained into the industry.
Yeah, so a lot of people are now actually, like, looking at, like, spaces that are underutilized and saying, like, how can we better improve this?
Wow, that's really nice.
Because, like, when you're in a building, you don't think of, like, there's actually a lot of space dedicated for circulation.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like you don't want to, like, that's important square footage that's included in your building, so you don't want to just leave it, like, empty or wasted. So, like, just trying to optimize every space.
So something just popped into my head.
Okay.
So you know when you're at a grocery store,
Yes,
and you're lining up to check out, so a lot of people lining up would just be lining up because they finished shopping and are getting ready to pay. But a lot of grocery stores have those areas by the register where they have, like, last minute, like, chocolate bars, candy bars, maybe, like, a magazine. Would that be, like, considered good use of liminal space, or, like, consideration of liminal space?
Yeah, that's actually a good use of it.
Okay.
And, like, a lot of it, like, grocery store designs actually play on your psychology of, like, how someone, like, moves through a space and actually like thinks about buying stuff. So it's like when you're waiting, you're often usually bored.
Yes.
Especially if there's a long line.
Yeah.
So by putting these, like, magazine racks or these, like, candy bars or, like, this, like, fridge, you're kind of playing on someone's boredom and saying, like, oh, look, there's something I can look at. And then when you're looking at it, you're like, maybe I actually do want it.
Yeah.
Especially since you don't have much to do, you're like, okay, maybe I convince myself I do want this.
Yeah.
So then you would, like, pick it up. It's like, it's sort of your impulse section.
Yeah, so that is a good example of how grocery stores take advantage of these liminal spaces with conjunction to the human experience to make the most use out of it.
Yes.
Wow, I learned something.
Yes. Yeah,
that is amazing.
Yeah, and like in conjunction to or in addition to the grocery stores, Sephora does a good job of this too. When you're lining up, they have like the $5 or like the mini packagings. Yeah. Yes, that's a good use of liminal space as well.
Wow, that is cool.
Yes.
So I hope that you guys learned something along with me because I right now am fascinated and I think I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to liminal spaces all around me wherever I go. But learning about liminal spaces was the plan for now. Listen to our next episode to continue figuring it out with us.
Thanks for following along to this episode. If you liked it, please give us a like, review, and subscribe for more. Until then, follow us on Instagram at What's the Plan Podcast for what the next plan is.